Jasmine Crockett couldn't help herself. She actually laughed because when Trump suddenly demanded Republicans release the Epstein files, she knew he'd spent months secretly trying to block that exact vote. And what she said next exposed the whole game. Hit that subscribe button right now because you're about to watch how one Congresswoman used Trump's own words to prove he wasn't demanding transparency. He was buying time, and the receipts she pulled out, they told a very different story than the one he was selling. The briefing room was smaller than you'd expect for something this significant. No cameras, no press gallery, just a secure congressional facility with reinforced doors and a classification level that meant phones stayed outside. Crockett had been in rooms like this dozens of times, classified briefings on national security, sensitive intelligence updates, the kind of meetings where what's said inside never officially happened outside. But this meeting was different. This wasn't intelligence officials presenting findings. This was a confrontation that had been building for weeks, and everyone in the room knew it. Across the table sat Michael Davis, a senior advisor to Donald Trump, who'd been sent to clarify the former president's position on the Epstein file releases. Davis had that specific look that political operatives develop after years of spin, expensive suit, perfect hair, an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else, but was being paid extremely well to be here. Next to him sat two attorneys from Trump's legal team, their presence alone, signaling that this wasn't a casual policy discussion. This was damage control. Crockett had arrived with just one aide and a single folder. She didn't need a legal team or a communication strategy. She needed the timeline she'd been building for the past 3 weeks. And she needed Davis to explain something that didn't make sense. How Trump had gone from quietly working to prevent an Epstein file release vote to publicly demanding that very same release on social media. The meeting started with Davis delivering what was clearly a prepared statement. The president has been consistent in his belief that transparency serves the public interest. He began his voice carrying that practiced cadence of someone who'd rehearsed in front of a mirror. That's why he's now calling on Speaker Johnson and House Republicans to move forward with releasing the Epstein files. The American people deserve to know the truth about Jeffrey Epstein's network of associates and enablers. Crockett let him finish. She even let the silence hang for a moment after he stopped talking, watching him settle back in his chair with the satisfied expression of someone who thought he'd successfully delivered his message. Then she opened her folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "That's interesting, Mr. Davis," she said, her tone conversational, almost friendly, "because I have here a memo dated October 18th, that's about 6 weeks ago, from Speaker Johnson's office to select members of Republican leadership. It's marked confidential discussion points, and it explicitly references concerns raised by President Trump's legal team about the timing of any Epstein-related document releases." She looked up from the paper. "So, which version is true? The one where he's demanding transparency, or the one where his lawyers were advising leadership to delay any votes on file releases?" Davis's expression didn't change, but one of the attorneys leaned over and whispered something. Crockett waited, letting the discomfort build. Finally, Davis responded. "I'm not familiar with the specific memo you're referencing, but I can assure you that the president's current position, his current position," Crockett interrupted smoothly, "is very different from his position 6 weeks ago. That's my point." "So, what changed? Did he suddenly develop a passion for transparency? Or did something else happen that made him realize trying to block the releases was becoming more politically dangerous than just letting them happen?" Now Davis was visibly uncomfortable. The president has always supported appropriate transparency. "No, he hasn't." Crockett's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. "Let's be very clear about the timeline here because I think it's important. For months, there's been a push in Congress to release the full Epstein files. Multiple members from both parties have called for it. The DOJ has portions of these files. The courts have released some documents, but the comprehensive release, the one that would include all the emails, all the flight logs, all the deposition testimony, that's been stalled. And every time someone tries to force a vote, it gets delayed. Procedural issues, committee review, privacy concerns. There's always a reason why now isn't the right time. She pulled out another document. Then 3 weeks ago, something interesting happened. Representative Anna Paulina Luna filed a privileged resolution that would force a floor vote on releasing the files. No more committees, no more delays, just a straight up or down vote on whether the American people get to see what's in those documents. And you know what happened? Speaker Johnson refused to schedule it. Said it needed further review. Said there were legal complications. But here's what he didn't say publicly. He'd been advised by President Trump's legal team that forcing that vote right now would be, quote, politically and legally problematic. Davis tried to interject. I think you're conflating separate. I'm not conflating anything. Crockett cut him off. I'm reading from documents that show a clear pattern. Trump's team wanted that vote delayed. Johnson delayed it. And it stayed delayed until about 5 days ago when suddenly Trump does a complete 180 and starts posting on social media that Republicans should release the files immediately. So, I'll ask you again, what changed? The room was completely silent except for the low hum of the ventilation system. One of Trump's attorneys finally spoke up. Congresswoman, the president's social media posts speak for themselves. If you're suggesting some kind of coordinated strategy to block transparency, that's simply not accurate. Crockett smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. Here's what I think happened. I think Trump and his legal team realized that blocking the vote was backfiring. Every delay made him look guilty. Every procedural obstacle made people wonder what he was trying to hide. So, someone in his inner circle, maybe you, Mr. Davis, came up with a brilliant political strategy. Flip the script. Instead of quietly blocking the release, publicly demand it. Make it look like he's the one pushing for transparency. And here's the genius part. While he's making noise about releasing the files, he's also pushing for new investigations into Epstein's network. She pulled out yet another document, and Davis's face went pale. This is a letter from Trump's attorneys to the DOJ dated 1 week ago. It requests that the department open new investigative proceedings into potential accomplices in Epstein's operation. Sounds noble, right? Except here's what happens when you open new investigations. All the documents related to those investigations become protected under active investigation rules. They can't be released to Congress or the public because it might compromise ongoing prosecutions. So Trump isn't actually pushing for transparency. He's creating a legal mechanism to keep the files sealed while looking like he wants them released. The room erupted. Davis started talking over one of the attorneys who was frantically taking notes. Crockett's aide looked stunned. Clearly, this revelation was news, even to them. And Crockett just sat there calmly watching the panic unfold across the table. That's a completely unfair characterization. Davis finally managed. The president believes that anyone involved in Epstein's crimes should be prosecuted. And if that requires new investigations, if he cared about prosecuting Epstein's accomplices, why didn't he push for these investigations when he was actually president? Crockett's voice had gone sharp now. The lawyer in her taking over. He had 4 years, Mr. Davis. 4 years with full control of the DOJ. He could have ordered any investigation he wanted. But he didn't. Epstein died in federal custody during Trump's administration, and there was no push for expanded investigations, then no demands for full file releases, no public statements about getting to the truth. But now when he's out of power and facing questions about his own connections to Epstein, suddenly he's a crusader for justice. Do you understand how that looks? Davis tried a different approach. The president's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein was limited to social acquaintance decades ago. He's been very clear about that. He's been sued twice in cases involving Epstein, Crockett countered immediately. Both cases were eventually dropped or settled, but they existed. There are photographs of them together at multiple events. There are quotes from Trump calling Epstein a terrific guy. There are flight logs and party guest lists and all sorts of documented connections. Now, maybe all of that is innocent. Maybe Trump didn't know what Epstein was doing. But if that's true, why spend months trying to prevent a vote on releasing files that would prove his innocence? She leaned forward. Here's what innocent people do, Mr. Davis. They welcome transparency. They say, release everything. Let people see that I wasn't involved. They don't send lawyers to advise congressional leadership to delay votes. They don't create new investigations to legally seal documents. They don't flip-flop from blocking releases to demanding releases based on which strategy polls better. One of Trump's attorneys tried to take control. Congresswoman, I think you're making a lot of assumptions. I'm making observations based on documented evidence. Crockett shot back. And here's another observation. Mike Johnson has been avoiding scheduling the Epstein vote for weeks. Every time someone asks him about it, he deflects. Every time pressure builds, he finds a procedural reason to delay. And now I know why. Because Trump told him to. Trump, who's now posting on social media that Johnson should release the files, is the same person who spent months making sure Johnson didn't release the files. She pulled out her phone, technically a violation of the secure facility protocols, but nobody stopped her and read from Trump's recent post. Republicans should immediately release the Epstein files. The American people deserve transparency about everyone who was involved with this monster. That's what he posted 3 days ago. But 6 weeks ago, his legal team was telling congressional leadership that releasing these files would be problematic. So, which Trump are we supposed to believe? The one who demands transparency on Twitter or the one who works behind the scenes to block it? Davis had lost his composure entirely. The president's position has evolved as more information has become available. Crockett actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a genuine laugh that conveyed exactly how absurd she found that explanation. His position evolved in 6 weeks. What new information could he possibly have learned about Jeffrey Epstein in the last 6 weeks that he didn't know for the previous 20 years? Mr. Davis, do you understand how this sounds? You're asking me to believe that Trump went from delay the release to release everything immediately because of new information. What information? That people were starting to ask why he was blocking it. The meeting was falling apart. One of the attorneys was on his phone. Also a protocol violation, presumably calling someone for guidance. Davis was stumbling through responses that didn't address Crockett's actual questions. And Crockett was just getting started. Let's talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene, she continued, shifting gears, because I think her recent behavior is instructive. MTG spent years being Trump's loudest defender, attacking anyone who questioned him, spreading conspiracy theories, the whole package. Then a few days ago, she posts what looks like an apology. Sort of says maybe she was wrong about some things. Suggests that the MAGA movement might need to do some soul-searching. And you know what I think happened? I think she saw the Epstein file information. I think she realized that defending Trump on this issue was going to make her look complicit. And I think she made the calculation that it was time to create some distance. Even MTG, who's made her entire political career on unwavering Trump loyalty, saw the writing on the wall. Davis tried to interrupt. Representative Greene's statements are her own. Oh, I know they're her own, Crockett agreed. And that's what makes them so significant. When your most loyal defender starts hedging, when the person who's defended you against every accusation suddenly starts talking about maybe being wrong, that tells you something. It tells you that even inside MAGA world, people are getting nervous about the Epstein connections. And that's why Trump flipped his position. Not because he suddenly cares about transparency, but because he realized that blocking the release was becoming indefensible even to his base. She closed her folder and looked directly at Davis. Here's my concern, Mr. Davis. I think Trump is engaged in what we call in legal terms obstruction through misdirection. He's making noise about wanting transparency while simultaneously creating legal obstacles to actual transparency. He's demanding file releases while his lawyers are opening investigations that will seal those files. He's attacking Mike Johnson for not releasing documents while his own team advised Johnson not to release them. It's a shell game, and it's working because people aren't paying close enough attention to notice that his public position contradicts his private actions. Davis made one last attempt to defend his boss. The president has consistently opposed political violence and chaos. Has he? Crockett's eyebrows went up because I seem to remember January 6th. I remember stand back and stand by. I remember years of rhetoric that normalized aggression toward political opponents. And now when questions about Epstein come up, we're seeing the same pattern: create chaos, shift blame, make it impossible to follow the actual story because there's so much noise. But some of us are still paying attention, Mr. Davis. Some of us are still following the receipts, and the receipts show that Trump didn't want these files released until he realized blocking them was worse than releasing them. The meeting ended shortly after that with no real resolution. Davis promised to relay the Congresswoman's concerns to Trump's team, which everyone in the room understood meant absolutely nothing would change. The attorneys packed up their papers quickly, clearly eager to escape. And Crockett walked out with the same folder she'd walked in with, having accomplished exactly what she'd intended, putting on the record that Trump's sudden advocacy for transparency was neither sudden nor sincere. The next day, Trump posted again, "Jasmine Crockett is a radical Democrat who's trying to distract from real issues by making baseless accusations. I've always supported transparency." Unlike the Biden crime family, it was predictable, uninspired, and completely failed to address any of the specific contradictions Crockett had raised. Her response came during a press conference that afternoon. "The former president can call me whatever names he wants. What he can't do is explain why his legal team spent months advising Republican leadership to delay the Epstein vote while he now claims to support that exact release. He can't explain why his attorneys are opening new investigations that will legally seal the documents he claims to want released. And he can't explain why, if he's innocent and has nothing to hide, he's working so hard to control what information becomes public." Political analysts started picking up on what Crockett had exposed. A Washington Post piece titled "Trump's Epstein Transparency Flip-Flop Raises Questions" detailed the timeline of his shifting positions. Legal experts explained on cable news how opening new investigations could indeed create barriers to document releases. Even some conservative commentators started questioning why Trump's actions didn't match his rhetoric. But perhaps the most significant impact came from inside Congress itself. After Crockett's closed-door confrontation became an open secret, these things always leaked. Pressure mounted on Mike Johnson to finally schedule the Epstein file vote. 3 Republican members publicly broke with leadership to demand immediate action. Anna Paulina Luna's privileged resolution, which had been stalled for weeks, suddenly had new momentum. Johnson tried to thread the needle, announcing that the committee would carefully review appropriate mechanisms for document release while respecting ongoing investigative equities. It was classic political speak that meant nothing and satisfied no one. Crockett's response was characteristically direct. "We don't need careful review. We need a vote." And every day that Speaker Johnson delays that vote, he proves that Trump's demand for transparency was always a bluff. A bluff that I called. The story continues to unfold. As of now, the comprehensive Epstein files remain unreleased. Trump continues to post about transparency while his legal team continues to create obstacles to that transparency. Johnson continues to delay the vote and Crockett continues to call out the contradiction between what powerful people say and what they actually do. In a town hall back in her Dallas district, a constituent asked her why she kept pushing on this issue when it would be easier to just move on. Her answer captured exactly why the Epstein file fight mattered. Because in a democracy, powerful people don't get to control what truths the public learns. They don't get to create investigations to seal documents while claiming they want transparency. They don't get to work behind the scenes to block votes while publicly demanding those exact votes. And when they try to do all of that, someone has to call it out. Today, that someone is me. Tomorrow, it might be you. But the principle doesn't change. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. And the people fighting hardest against sunshine are usually the ones who need it most. If this breakdown of how Jasmine Crockett exposed Trump's transparency bluff resonated with you, smash that like button and subscribe for more analysis of the political moments that reveal who's actually fighting for accountability versus who's just performing it. Drop a comment below telling us what sealed documents you think deserve immediate release. And share this video with anyone who's tired of politicians saying one thing while doing another. Your engagement helps us keep following the receipts until the truth comes out. Where Tricklawed can make mistakes.